Let's get to the Ohio State, because we have some exclusive behind-the-scenes reporting for you this morning. Did a lot of work yesterday. I know we have a lot of Ohio State fans that watch the show. I can only tell you that there is a certain awkwardness in Columbus this morning about how Jim Knowles left the Ohio State Buckeye program, how he ended up at Penn State. And I understand that the garden variety Ohio State fan is going to tell you that Ryan Day and Jim Knowles, the former defensive coordinator at Ohio State, Ryan Day, the current head coach, they don't like each other. They didn't get along. There was dysfunction. Nobody argues that. I talked to two sources yesterday who told me that, yes, Jim Knowles is not the easiest guy to work with, that he was very much a my way or the highway guy, and it caused friction in the meeting rooms with players and his assistant coaches. But let's get something very clear. Ryan Day had every intention of having Jim Knowles get a pay raise and remain as his defensive coordinator in Columbus into the future. There was no question about that. Things got awkward when Jim Knowles reportedly felt disrespected when he did not get a contract extension before the national championship game. It started after their first round win against Tennessee, where their defense was absolutely lights out. There was no question about that. Jim Knowles and his representation went to Ohio State and began the process of negotiating a contract extension. I was told yesterday by sources close to the program that Ryan Day put a cap on that and said, we're not going to do this now. We are focused. There was awkwardness. There was frustration from Ryan Day to Jim Knowles that his representation at that moment in time, took the focus off of the football team and put it on himself and went to administration and started asking for a contract extension. Jim Knowles agreed, put all that on hold. Then as soon as the national championship game was final, they had won the college football playoff, Jim Knowles the next day went right back to, I need a contract extension and I need it now, because Oklahoma has called and would like to offer me $3 million to be their defensive coordinator. It only ratcheted up the frustration and the awkwardness from Ryan Day and, frankly, from Ohio State administration to Jim Knowles and his representation. It made them feel like Jim Knowles was out looking for a job, or maybe even, as it was described to me, looking for a way to leverage Ohio State for more money, because nobody really believed that Jim Knowles was going to take that OU job. When that conversation did not go well, Jim Knowles and his representation allegedly started shopping Jim Knowles to other open DC jobs. This is where Notre Dame comes in. Jim Knowles and his representation reached out to Notre Dame and said, hey, we would like to have a conversation about Jim potentially becoming your defensive coordinator. Of course, Notre Dame answered the phone. Of course, they were willing to have a conversation. I'm told that Marcus Freeman and Jim Knowles had one conversation. It lasted about 10 minutes. That was the full extent of it. There was never a contract offer from Notre Dame to Jim Knowles. I was told directly yesterday by sources on both sides that there was never a financial discussion had between Notre Dame and Jim Knowles. There was a cursory phone call between Marcus Freeman and Jim Knowles to gauge interest. That's where it began, and that's where it ended. However, Jim Knowles and his representation took that back to Ohio State and said, hey, look, now Notre Dame and Oklahoma are interested. That really turned things, I think, off completely for Ohio State. I think that's where Jim Knowles wound up walking out the door, because Penn State had legitimate interest in Jim Knowles. As soon as it was known that Jim was available, and as soon as Notre Dame had leaked, call it what you want, made it known that they had a conversation with Jim Knowles, that's where Penn State got very aggressive. The relationship between Notre Dame and Penn State is well known. They have a lot of players with connections. It was not difficult for that information to flow from South Bend to Happy Ending Valley. As soon as Penn State got word of that, they aggressively pursued Jim Knowles. They wanted to strengthen their ability to recruit in Pennsylvania, and specifically in and around Philadelphia, where Jim Knowles is from. He has deep ties. He is recruited well there. That's how Jim Knowles got to Penn State. It was never a thing where Ryan Day said, screw you, I hate you, we fought all season long, get the hell out of here. That never happened. This idea that Ryan Day hates Jim Knowles, that never happened. Because the fact of the matter is, after Jim Knowles let Ohio State know, hey, I'm going to Penn State, Ryan Day made a serious push to retain Jim Knowles after Knowles and his people let Ohio State know, we are under agreement verbally with Penn State. Ryan Day wanted to match that offer, at which point it was too late. He was too far down the road. I think the bridge was burned. I think Jim Knowles felt unwanted in Columbus and very wanted in Happy Ending Valley, all of which to say, Jake, this is a bad look for Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that you've allowed one of the best defensive coordinator talents in the country to leave the program, and everyone wants to focus on the logistics of that. Everyone wants to focus on that, the details of that, and that is very important for Ohio State's image. But the reality is what's taking place here is you went from being a program that doesn't win enough national championships to finally getting that job done to now losing a key piece of that operation. So I'm sitting here questioning, like, hey, you won a national championship, but you didn't beat Michigan, and now you've lost Jim. And so that's the hard part for me when I think about Ohio State, and I kind of consider like where they're at right now in the whole college football landscape. Like, are we supposed to sit here and believe that Ohio State's got a great shot at repeating or even getting back to the national championship game? Because I certainly don't. I think that now you're going to have to show me you can go out and get a defensive coordinator that's even in the neighborhood of how good Jim Knowles is at his job. I mean, there's a reason that it's basically Jim and Pete Kwiatkowski at Texas. Like, there's a reason that those two are in their own company. So for me, yeah, I think that it's not a great look for Ohio State, that this is how the whole thing went down. But I think in the bigger conversation, Ohio State is at risk of essentially winning one national championship and not really pushing that ball forward. Like, if you're Ryan Day, obviously you wanted to win the national championship, and then you wanted to repeat that process, right? Maybe you don't win another natty back to back, but you're right back in that conversation again, versus maybe you're a one and done in the playoff, or maybe, I just have a hard time believing that defense is going to be as good as it was, because they were dominant. They in the scheme had a lot to do with it, but that's how teams become championship good. Elite scheme with elite talent typically leads to dominating football games. So I just think that Ohio State's now got to figure out how to move on from this. Like, at some point, you're going to have to figure out how to replace Jim and kind of put this story to bed for the program.
Well, I think there's also a couple of other things. You're Ohio State. You're going to be just fine. You're going to have your pick of really good defensive coordinators, but that might not be your biggest problem. And this desire by the Houston Texans to hire Chip Kelly, there is a belief that Chip Kelly is the leading candidate in Houston. We'll see if that comes to fruition, whatever that might be. If you lose Jim Knowles and Chip Kelly, now you're going to have a tough time bouncing back. But make no mistake about it, what Penn State did with Jim Knowles was an absolute coup, because that defense, while it was very good last year, they made some mistakes that you just can't make at the line of scrimmage. Jim Knowles is going to pick that up because he is a very detail-oriented guy. But maybe the biggest win in getting Jim Knowles is you kept Andy Kotelnicki. He didn't go to West Virginia, which is probably the shocker, right? And now you put those two together. Those two guys are the cure for what ails James Franklin. And I think when you look at Penn State, there is no question they are one of the most talented teams in the country. Talent has rarely been James Franklin's issue. Bad decision-making in the middle of a big situation has plagued Penn State. And you look at Jim Knowles and you look at Andy Kotelnicki and you look at the talent, you're bringing back two of the best running backs in the country, regardless what you think of Drew Aller, right? Because I think Drew Aller, this nonsense that Drew Aller's a day one draft pick in the NFL, stop. You're hallucinating. Drew Aller is never going to be a first-round pick unless he completely changes his ability as a quarterback and displays that on the field next year, if you put Drew Aller in this draft, as weak as it is for quarterbacks, he's not day one.
Right.
He simply is not. He got exposed in multiple ways against the best teams that he faced last year, including and Jim Knowles, who exposed him. You look at his poor performance against Notre Dame, but as poor as he has been, that offense is going to be pretty good next year, better than it is this year. You look at their defense, they're losing talent, but their recruiting class and their returning talent on that Penn State defense, Jim Knowles is a better coordinator. He is going to improve that defense. Penn State got better. But I think one of the things that you really have to address here is what happened and how now do you bounce back? Because this story right here, this should not be overlooked. Ohio State in the 2023-24 fiscal year lost $36 million on athletics. A lot of that was ticket sales. Totally agree. You played, I think, 2 less home games.
You did. Yeah.
So you had less ticket sales, which meant, and this is probably too behind the scenes, but you get a lot of donations for ticket sales. When you have 2 less home games, you're getting a lot fewer donations and you're selling a lot less tickets. And I think that number was $17 million in a shortfall, because you also have to remember that game day revenue plays a significant part of the athletic budget at Ohio State. 2 less home games is not just ticket sales, friends. It is branding. It is advertising and marketing partners in game, because those contracts are written. A lot of those contracts are written of how many games am I getting for the exposure of my sign in your stadium? You lost a lot of money by having 2 less home games. And when you look at coaching compensation, a lot of that has to do with, are we profitable or are we not? And it's impossible to say it out loud. It feels almost like you're crazy. Ohio State football was not profitable in 2023-24. Now, did you run through the college football playoff? Did you make a ton of money? And did you make a ton of money for your conference? Absolutely. But that money is down the road. When we're talking about right now, and you're talking about paying a defensive coordinator $3+ million, that probably is a win for Ohio State. Not overpaying to keep Jim Knowles, I think that was probably a win. You lose Chip Kelly, and now you're going to be in a really even more difficult spot financially, because you're probably going to have to pay an offensive guy more than that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think this is panic mode. I don't think this is a bad time for Ohio State. I think it's a bad look. I think, frankly, Ryan Day thought that this was going to be a very short, less than 12-hour process to get an extension done with Jim Knowles, and it turned into a dumpster fire. And it blew up in his face, and I think he was, from what I understand, I think he was a little surprised that Jim Knowles was gone so quickly.
Yeah, well, I just think that Jim Knowles is well, first of all, I think as a coordinator, that as an elite coordinator on the market, you're always going to have availability, especially as a defensive coordinator in college football. That's number one. But number two, I think that, Jim, so if you think about the reporting on who Jim Knowles is and the things that you've just said, right? Like, hey, Jim is a my way or the highway guy. Jim is someone who maybe isn't the easiest to work with. So I think if you're, Jim Knowles, you're sitting here saying, okay, well, I've just won a championship. Obviously the offense was great, but I can easily sit here at a negotiating table and say, hey, I've just beaten 3 or 4 of the best teams in college football to win this championship. We didn't go down the Penn State path. We didn't have some cupcake to get to the national championship game. Like, I have a lot of leverage here to get something done. And it's a matter of getting paid. I never blame people for trying to get their market value.
Totally
right?
agree.
I understand, like the only situation where I feel like, hey, it's a conversation to take less in order to get more is when you're a quarterback in the NFL, right? At some point, you're going to have to do what TB12 did, which was take less money so that the Patriots could go out and bring more talent in so that he had more options to throw to. That I understand, but excluding that, there's really no other situation where I would take less, and Jim didn't take less. And I think that, Ohio State is a program that really should be in the national championship every year. I do think this conversation, and this is for a different day, but the Big Ten versus SEC thing that is ongoing, what's the better conference, who's in the better spot? This situation at Ohio State plays right into that conversation, because if Ohio State is just going to be some one and done next year in the college football playoff or whatever, like if they're not a real factor in the national championship game, then I don't know how, if you're the Big Ten, you can seriously stake a claim to being the best conference at that point. You need, like, for the Big Ten to be successful, they need Ohio State to be in a 5-year window where they're just one of the most dominant teams in the country. Because that's what the SEC had in Alabama, and then they doubled down on that with Georgia, and then they tripled down on it with Texas. So that's why I say, like, this conversation isn't just about like how Ohio State fan views the program or how the media views the program or whatever. This is about, how much money can the conference make, and then how much money can Ohio State make, and then, how important is it to win football games? Because if you're going to continue, and they won't, right? I mean, there were a variety of factors that went into them being in a $37 million deficit, I believe it was.
Yep.
There were a variety of factors, that are all laid out there, ticket sales being one of them. But you can't continue to be in that level of deficit. You can't continue to have the financial volatility to that level. You need to be in a place where it's like, hey, every year our swing of like, hey, are we in a deficit or are we positive, needs to be like a $10 million conversation, not a damn near $40 million conversation.
Well, but I also think, let's not forget, two guys that are paramount here in this discussion about Ohio State: Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs.
Yeah.
You've got two of the best players in the country on each side of the football. Julian saying, I think there's no reason to believe that a kid that has been dominant every snap of the football he's ever taken in his life is not going to be that at Ohio State. You're going to replace Jim Knowles. Watch Chip Kelly. Does Chip Kelly, who I think it's important to say, and I said this on TikTok, and I know that a lot of Ohio State fans disagreed with me last night about this. If you don't follow me on TikTok, you really should. The Monty Show. MONTY, The Monty Show. Follow me on Insta Snapface Talk. If Chip Kelly leaves, and I'm not saying he's out recruiting. 3 recruits posted pictures of Chip Kelly quite literally standing at their front door. He's on the road recruiting for Ohio State. If the Houston Texans with CJ Stroud, an interesting tie to Ohio State, if the Houston Texans with CJ Stroud say, hey, here's X million dollars, come and be our offensive coordinator, how difficult is that going to be for Chip Kelly to turn down?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be tough.
It's going to be really tough.
And I think that, it's that conversation, like as far as Chip's concerned, it's the conversation that we always have with candidates in college and at the NFL level. Some guys are elite coordinators, not head coaches, and Chip is that. And I think he's proved that time and time again. And if I had to guess, again, just speculating, I would guess that Chip Kelly is pretty comfortable, with the idea that being one of the best offensive coordinators in college football or the NFL is what he should be doing, right? Like, he tried the head coach route. It didn't really work for him. Like, he's been down that road. I think that all he wants to do is be an offensive coordinator in a big time program and compete to win national championships or Super Bowls. So,
I don't think he's going to Tampa.
Yeah.
I don't think Chip's going to Jacksonville, who has made an official request to talk to him. Yeah. I think DeMeco Ryans has something special working in Houston. I think Chip Kelly would have to have that conversation. Mm-hmm. And if I'm Ryan Day, I am telling Chip Kelly, I don't care. I'll pay you whatever you need. You're my guy. We have got to have you. And I would do everything I could do to put his pen to paper on an extension that makes him, even if he's got to be the highest paid offensive coordinator in college football, I don't care.
But again, you're Ohio State. Like, you should be able to work with that.
Yeah, you should.
I mean, everyone wants to say they buy all their players. Like, I did a TikTok yesterday where I asked a question like, bro, like, everyone criticizes Ohio State for buying all their players, even though they didn't, right? They only brought in a handful of guys that were kind of cherry on top of the roster for the most part. But everyone always says, oh, well, they bought all their players, and that must be why they're in a financial deficit, and that must be why that's the situation. But that's not true, right? This doesn't have anything to do with Ohio State being irresponsible financially. It has everything to do with season to season. They're all different, right? Like, and that's something Ohio State can work on, in my opinion. I don't know why Ohio State's not playing 8 home games a year. I feel like they should be. I feel like they should be able to schedule that. But again, that's something that's something that they can work on. And I think that if you're willing to go out and be a juggernaut in the portal for just the top 1% of talent, because that's essentially what they did, you should be willing to pay Chip Kelly a pretty hefty number. Like, I wouldn't be opposed to, if Chip says, hey, I need 5 a year. Hey, I'm not going to be opposed to that, because the reality is yes, Jim Knowles had that defense working, but you don't get to where you are without the offense, bro. Like, the offense is, what took you places this year. Your ability to get Carnell Tate and Egbuka to take a step forward.
Will Howard.
But like, your ability to say, hey, Will, like, Jeremiah Smith is gonna be taken away by Texas. They're gonna run a 3-man zone concept to stop him, right?
Yep.
Linebackers guarding the middle of the field. Corners obviously playing tight man coverage, and they've got a safety over the top. So they're going to take him away. Let's go ahead and focus on these 2 other guys, and obviously Quinshawn Judkins and Travion Henderson, and we're going to be just fine. But Chip Kelly put that together. Pay the man.
And what I'm telling you is, and I don't know that we will know until it happens, but are you paying Mike Denbrock at Notre Dame, who makes $2.1 million? Are you paying Chip Kelly more than him? You better.
Yeah.
You better.
Yeah.
And are you paying a guy? Are you going to pay him the way that LSU pays Blake Baker, who I think is the highest paid OC or coordinator in football at $2.5 million?
But look at some of these numbers, right? $2.5 million for one of, if not the highest paid DC in college football, and Jim Knowles wanted $500,000 more, essentially.
And you said no.
So that's the portion that I have trouble with, is like, I don't think that Ryan Day said, hey, like, I'm not willing to pay Jim. And this is what I said yesterday. Ryan Day didn't say I'm unwilling, or get the hell out of here. That's not what happened.
Jim Knowles, I think, would have gone back to Ohio State for, if he was making 1.9, I think he'd have gone back for less than $3 million. I think, and I feel like Penn State did what they needed to do to put his name on paper.
Yeah.
So less of us, more of you. Let's get into the comment section. And my God. Oh my God.
Dude is back.
Aaron Wilson, the single greatest Texas Tech fan on planet Earth, who we actually have. Texas Tech is a big part of the conversation this morning. But Aaron Wilson, good to see you, my guy. America's favorite mailman.
Yeah, how is delivery going, dude? I know that winter's been kind of an adventure here.
Especially, especially in Texas. Aaron, dude, it is so good to see you.
Yeah.
And if you're not a long time on this show, Aaron Wilson's a stud. Good to see you. All right. Jesse Crum, financial reports from July 23rd to June 24th. That's exactly right.
Yeah, that's what we said.
Kim Coulter, good morning to you. Conundrum, Jerry selling roller dogs. He probably is.
Yeah, dude.
He probably is.
Yeah.
It is, Bailey Dietrich, got to be America's team. The Ohio State.
Dude.
Yeah. It's fine. The Thinker, I'm very close to the Ohio State program. Oh, really? I am related to someone on staff. Oh, my goodness. The reason I was told no left is that they would not let him run the Jack defense anymore. I would disagree with that. But, hey, somebody on staff, so I'm certain it must be true. Jimmy, Ohio State Buckeyes, 24-25 national. Are you sure about that? I love that when anything bad happens now at Ohio State. Oh, OHIO, national champions. You're going to find out very quickly Like if I said to you, who are the 5 best teams in the Big Ten right now? No, if you put anybody ahead of Ohio State, honestly, you should have your skull checked. Penn State's going to be number 2. Who do you think is the 3rd best team
Oregon.
I think Oregon's 5th.
How the hell is Oregon 5th?
Because I think if you look at I think you have to have a healthy respect for what Oregon did not do in the playoff.
Uh-huh.
You're losing a lot of talent off that Oregon roster. A lot. I think you've got to put Michigan 3rd because of the recruiting, what we saw on the field. Now, who knows what happens over the summer with enforcement? But here today on January 28th, I'd have Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan. I'd have Illinois 4th. I'd have Oregon 5th, and I'd have USC 6th.
Yeah, I disagree with that. I think Sharon Moore is going to have to show me. Like, that's great. You recruited. You're going to have to show me that you can actually go and do it.
Oh, I think he showed you last year.
I disagree with that. I think Ohio State played a terrible game. I think
it's not the Ohio State win.
Bro, they got dominated by Oregon last year.
It's not the Ohio State win. When you look at the development of the offense over the season, they got better. He just did not have a quarterback. Well, that issue, if they would have been able to throw the ball last year, I think there's a real chance they finished in a much better position. That could have been. Yeah, we'll see. It is what it is. The Thinker says Knowles cost Ohio State a lot of wins against Michigan. No, he did not. Jim Knowles didn't murder your dog. He didn't slap your child. He didn't disrespect your woman. Jim Knowles is either 1 or 1A of the best defensive coordinators in college football. So you can sit here and continue to try and vilify this guy, which a lot of Ohio State fans are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Knowles did nothing but win a national championship for you last year. I will continue to tell you, Jim Knowles not only put his guys in the place to make a play, then they went and made the play. So his guys are well coached, they're in the right spot, and they're mentally prepared to make plays. That's all coaches can do. And he did that across the board. I'll also remind you, Caleb Downs, look at how deep that defense was this year. They're going to put 7 guys in the NFL this year. You can try and disparage Jim Knowles all you want. And you can try and disparage his defense all you want. They didn't lose to Oregon because of the defense. They didn't lose to Michigan because of the defense. So, we can... Yeah. It is what it is. Eric Wasikowski, are we living in clown world and the Lions front office is actually competent? It must be. It must be. Chip Kelly to Houston and Jeff Grimes to Jeff Grimes. I have respect for Jeff Grimes. He's not an elite offensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
Don B, it's not a bad look for Ohio State. He wanted to leave. No, he didn't want to leave. Jim Knowles asked repeatedly for an extension. This is very much an axiom that rings true in sports on a regular basis. When you allow somebody to go out and find out how much they're worth.
Gordon Hayward.
Great example. When you say to somebody, yeah, we're gonna work this out eventually.
We'll test the market, like
go ahead. Talk to OU, talk to Notre Dame. Didn't think he'd go talk to Penn State, did you? Until they did. It wanted him to leave. You can't change the adult's mind. It's not next man up, and under no way, shape, or form did Ryan Day want Jim Knowles to leave.
Yeah.
Dude,
there's not another Jim Knowles just laying around.
There's not this next man up. There's not. Is Ohio State going to be fine? Yes. Are they going to be as good as they were this year on defense? Absolutely not.
Yeah, the next man up thing when it comes to elite defensive coordinators is an excuse for what happened, in my opinion.
Come on. Brad Smith, Penn State still have no wide. Why? Okay, so you think Penn State is untalented? Yeah. Write them off. They're not. I mean, never mind. They have the two best running backs in the Big Ten, and never mind that they just got better defensively, and they have the offensive coordinator who is up for just about every open job this year. They're untalented. They don't recruit. You might want to go check the portal in the recruiting grades. Don B. Penn State's offense is trash. Terrible. I mean, I have no idea how they're going to.
And again, you're focused on last year, bro. Last year's over with, man.
Yeah, it is.
What does that have to do with this coming year?
Henry, Ohio State will be fine, even if you clowns here think the sky is falling in on us. We have a secret weapon against Pedo State. It's called James Franklin. Nobody said the sky was falling in on you. Why is Ohio State fan taking up arms and
showing your true colors,
coming in and attacking people?
Yeah.
Nobody said the sky was falling. Did I not just say 10 minutes ago, you're going to be fine. You're going to get a really good defensive coordinator. Financially, you're going to be fine because you just won the college football playoff. You had a full complement of home games.
Yeah.
You're going to sell merchandise like there's, no other merchandise available because you won the national championship. Your ad and, revenue partner just grew. And yet here you are saying that you clowns in the sky, be better. Be better. He's leaving for Pedo State was known as Operation. Maybe. I'll never say it on this show. Did you buy her Dogecoin? Jeez, what a mess.
Ooh.
Knowles is a crybaby.
Oh.
Buckeyes will always be in the hunt. Haters know that. You mean N-O-W?
Don't talk crap about my team.
Haters know that. N-O.
Nice, dude. Nice.
We only had 5 transfers that really contributed. We raised NIL for retention purposes. You only had 5. Okay. First of all, I think we've talked repeatedly on this show that Ohio State did, in fact, buy a championship. Who cares if they bought a championship? Because that's what everybody's trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion's always been that you didn't buy your whole roster, but what you did is you finished the roster off with some really key additions, and they deserve credit for that. They're playing the same game you are. They're just playing it better.
It's wild to me that we're still having to talk about, well, you guys bought a championship. Yeah, why didn't you?
Yeah.
Why didn't you?
Yeah.
That's what revenue sharing and all of this other money and
come on, dude.
That's what the college football championships are built on now. And anybody telling you that we did it with homegrown players, well, then did you not pay them? Because everybody's roster is paid. Every single player in college football is bought and paid for. So the idea that buying a championship, get out of here. What are you doing? Kale, thank you. Gayha, exactly right. Go Eagles. Jesse Crum. Some people complaining about these spending big money for players are the same ones who complain about the Yankees outspending everyone. It might piss you off, but it's allowed. Yeah. Ohio State did nothing wrong. Laura Sims. Ohio State is always going to be one of the top teams in the country and get into the playoff, but it can't just be us. Other teams in their conference need to help out too. The financial model in college football, especially, you need every school in your conference to be competitive. We talk about it in the Big 12 all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Well, I think it's why Illinois is so important right now. I mean, the rise of Illinois, I think, Matt
USC
Rule,
is critical.
Matt Rule needs to get it going. Lincoln's got to get it going. Again, and this is really the difference, and we'll get to this, but the difference is that the Big Ten at the top of their league is competing and winning national championships with, regularity at this point. And the Big 12 and the ACC are not doing that. And yes, I do think there is a really compelling conversation around the Big 12 being a deeper conference top to bottom than the Big 10. The problem is the top end of the Big 12 is not nearly good enough to compete with the Big 10.
And I think the other part of this conversation about Ohio State is we're talking about paying players. You've got to pay coaches.
Yeah.
And I think, because what is Chip Kelly making? I think $2 million base. He got another $1 million in a bonus.
Yeah.
You're going to have to bring that $2 million base up. You might not want to. You have no choice.
Yep.
And Ohio State's tactics in their contracts for coaches, Ryan Day, hey, we're going to pay you a small base, and when you win, we're going to pay you huge bonuses.
Yeah, and I do think that college football inevitably is heading down this path of like you're going to go through. I mean, again, it's much like pro sports. It's much like what the Dodgers are doing right now, where everyone says, "Oh, well, the Dodgers are just buying all these players and getting all the Japanese players, and yada yada." Okay, well, yeah, they are, but they're deferring a ton of that money, and eventually that's going to come back to get them to the point where they're going to have to be bad for a few years. But that's not now.
And the problem with that is Roki Sasaki, the hot young Japanese pitcher that just signed, could have signed with any team in Major League Baseball. Where did he sign? With the LA Dodgers. Why did he sign there? Well, Monty, they got the gambler there. Yeah. Why did they get the gambler there? Because they win. They spend money. They do what's got to be done. Ohio State, the same. And they don't get caught in major cheating scandals. It's what I've said about Notre Dame. Notre Dame was never paying Jim Knowles $3 million plus to come and be their defensive coordinator.
Nope.
How much you want to bet Chip Kelly gets a pay raise? How much you want to bet that, or he's going to go to the Titans or the Texans? Excuse me. Chip gets paid well. Works the offense, which he loves, but with half that responsibility and headaches of being a head coach.
Yeah.
I agree.
But that's kind of my point. Is like he tried the head coach thing and it just didn't work for him, and I think that's why he settled in.
Yeah, and I think everybody wants to be a naysayer about Ohio State. And again, I don't understand why Ohio State fan is so over the top aggressive. I don't get it.
Yeah,
you just won a national championship. What I'm telling you is Ohio State's going to be fine. But if you're sitting here this morning as a Bucs fan thinking that, well, we're just going to repeat, I would be very careful with that complacency. Because while you might think that, all the nonsense people are making up about Jim Knowles. Jim Knowles wanted to be in Columbus. Ryan Day at the end tried to keep him. Ohio State didn't do enough to keep Jim Knowles as their defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to break it to you. He wanted to be there, and they didn't do enough to keep him. And he wound up going to one of your biggest rivals in the league, Penn State. And the more significant part of the Jim Knowles conversation is whether you liked his defense or not, he built that defense. Whether you like Jim Knowles or not, he recruits exceptionally well. Is he a lifer at Penn State? Probably not. There's a burnout factor with Jim. But make no mistake about it, that dude can recruit. He develops talent, and he wins games.
Yeah.
And he's been really good everywhere he's been. So, the Chad Carter. You can say all day long that the Big 12 is deeper top to bottom than the Big 10 if someone wants to. But as long as the 12 isn't putting in multiple teams in the playoff, who cares?
And I don't disagree with that, dude. I think that's facts.
And I don't care if BYU got hosed it doesn't matter. The funny thing is, when we talk about conferences struggling, everybody's overlooking what I've been trying to tell you for 2 years. The ACC is not nearly the basketball league everybody's making them out to be.
Mm-hmm.
They got 2 teams into the college football playoff and got humiliated. How do I say this tactfully? You made the same money as the Big 12, who was $30+ million behind the Big 10. Congratulations. You're both poverty conferences.
Facts.
You're both poverty conferences. And we can say that this is a money game. We play, I hate to tell you this out loud, we play college football to win money. That's what it's about. And the Big 10 is winning more money than everybody else.